Hello everybody, it's Calxiyn here. If you guys enjoyed this video, remember to join our Discord server, become patrons over on Patreon, and remember to comment down below with your thoughts. So, we are going to be talking about Ozpin today. But first, some background, if you guys didn't know, I actually worked with the police for a summer, and they gave us leadership training. So, I'm gonna use basically what we learned in the leadership training to apply to Ozpin, if that makes sense. Oh, dears. So we're gonna talk about Ozpin, and we're also gonna talk about Salem in a separate video. And so I'm gonna talk about basically some leadership-related things. So first you have Emergent versus assigned leadership. So you guys can probably sort of already guess what this means, but an assigned leader is a leader whose leadership position is based on occupying like a position like with an organization or something very formal. So
like legal rational authority, basically, like you have this authority because you are a judge or a police officer.
Exactly, right? But an emergent leader is perceived by others as the most influential member of the group, and emergent over time through communication, certain behavior, social involvement, and are highly informed, seek opinions, and are firm in their beliefs, but not so rigid that they can't take new ideas. So, here's the thing. Ozpin seems like he is an assigned leader, and that's not necessarily bad, but we'll get into why that may be problematic later. So, the reason why Ozpin seems to be an assigned leader is because the gods told him to go kill Salem, basically. Like, he wasn't chosen, or he wasn't naturally emerged, but he was chosen, right? And that may not be necessarily best. You know what I mean? Because I'm gonna use, like, a high school example, I guess. Like, sometimes teachers will pick kids to do certain tasks, or to be, like, head of class or something like that without an election, and the teachers pick them and they're assigned, and the person, I don't want to say is a total fuck up, but the person is a total fuck up, and so somebody else in the class will sort of emerge and take over, sort of thing, right? The problem with an assigned leader, not all the time, but sometimes, is that they're not actually qualified for the assignment that they've been given, while an emergent leader obviously comes out of the woodwork because a problem needs to be solved. And so when Ozpin has been assigned a leadership position, instead of sort of proving that he deserves it by emerging, we can already see the problem with him being given this task, and that can affect his leadership negatively. And I'm not saying that all assigned leaders are bad, but emergent leaders tend to be better because they prove to people that they are capable, and that's how they sort of lead, instead of somebody being assigned first and then proving later, if that makes sense. Would you agree with that, Hunter?
Yeah.
Alright, so that's our first problem, okay? And then you got transformational and pseudo-transformational leadership, alright? So transformational leadership is the ability of a leader to get people to do things like more so than they originally expected. And that's gonna be sort of a key component in what we're talking about. Where a pseudo-transformational leader, like, how they act, they have no intention of sacrificing their self-interest for the good of others. They are self-serving and generally don't care about the people that follow them. And usually, like, transformational leadership is obviously more effective, right? Because it encourages others to take a voluntary role because they see the leader is self-sacrificing in their behaviors, right? The problem with Ozpin is that he can't necessarily sacrifice anything and show that he is sacrificing.
Well,
because he doesn't have the risk of death.
I mean, but people don't know that.
Obviously people don't know that before, but they know now.
Well, I mean, not everyone.
Not everybody.
So far, like a drunk guy,
But in terms
teenagers.
of leading Team Ruby, right? Not the world, right? But in terms of leading Team Ruby, before they could have said, like, oh, Ozpin would totally give his life for us, right? You know, we're his students. But now they know that they're not really giving he's not giving his life.
Well, I mean,
he's,
it's pretty inconvenient either way.
I mean, that's true.
Like, oh, fuck, now I'm in a boy.
There's a difference between somebody who would say that, like, if I was like, Hunter, I would gladly die for you, but then I would reincarnate, wouldn't you be like, that's a little bit of a cop-out, Cal? Like, you know what I mean? Because, like, sure, I died, but I didn't actually die.
Yeah,
you know?
But are you coming back as a grasshopper? Or, like, not only do I die, but I come back as a millionaire.
Oh,
like,
dear.
Okay, this is...
But yeah, so that is something that is sort of relevant here, is that because Ozpin doesn't die, he has no risk of death.
I find your pursuit of self-sacrifice utterly underwhelming, now that I can
exactly.
appreciate how you're coming back from the dead.
Yeah. That's basically exactly it, right? And the other thing is that transformational leadership, you see the change, right? Ozpin hasn't changed anything. Their goal is to kill Salem, and if anything, he made it worse. So that's the other problem. And I'm not saying that he's necessarily selfish, but it is sort of pseudo-transformational when nothing has been transformed. Like, at the beginning, obviously, he made the schools and the relics and all that stuff, but that's even where you can kind of see that it was pseudo-transformational, just because it was for a selfish reasoning. Like, it wasn't necessarily to, like, train the huntsmen of tomorrow. Like, it was to give the relics a place where they could be protected by, like, a good 500 huntsmen, you know what I mean? And that's a little sketchy, because it's not like, oh, we wanna hone and foster the minds of the next generation. Like,
I need to hone and foster the minds of the next fuckers who are gonna be
protecting my relic.
Protecting my shit.
Exactly. And so that is kind of not good. That's not good. So now we're going to talk about one of the other concepts. So it's VUCA and VUCA Prime. So VUCA...
Sorry, one more time?
VUCA and VUCA Prime.
I mean, you know, after Optimus died, they were like, what if there's a new, like, Transformer Prime? Like,
oh, God.
VUCA Prime.
Here's
what?
this.
I think VUCA Prime is definitely the Scrappy-Doo of
VUCA stands for vital, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And so we live in that world. But they also live in that sort of world in Remnant, that it's volatile, the future is uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. They don't really know what's going to happen next, right? And then this can be counteracted by VUCA Prime, basically. So the volatility can be countered with vision, basically. Leaders provide and reinforce the way forward and navigate turbulence to achieve success. So obviously there's a little volatility with Team RWBY right now. Obviously they have a win, but I think that the next volume will sort of establish not everybody necessarily has faith in Ozpin, and obviously, you know, Weiss and Yang sort of mentioned that they've seen some shit, you know, and Yang called out Ozpin for lying, basically, or not telling them the entire truth or whatnot, right? So there's that. And vision brings the ability to transform uncertainty into understanding by bringing the team together so everyone understands that they can contribute to success and get on the same mindset. However, you can't get an understanding with everybody on the same mindset if you're lying to, or not telling the entire truth to the people that you want to work with. So Ozpin's other problem is that he's not that he's dishonest, but he's not forthcoming. Exactly. So that's not good. Complexity can be countered by clarity, and this is where the line comes in. If everyone's confused, there is no clarity. And so that is another thing that is making Ozpin a little bad right now. Ambiguity can be countered by agility, because what murkiness we tolerate and ambiguity won't matter next to a team working fast to respond to each other and destroy swamps of ambiguity relating to problems. So agility is the quickness you can use to work on what is ambiguous or, again, confusing. So this kind of all leads back to confusion and making the world clear, a world that is volatile and dangerous and all of that, right? Ozpin isn't the most clear person. He hasn't been. And so I think, like, obviously, like, you know, we see a bit of that in Volume 5, but that's going to be a big problem in the future if everybody is sort of confused and unclear. So now to kind of, you know, get to now what are the 5 bases of power, right? Because you see Ozpin's, like, failing categories here, right? Like, he's missing some essential pieces, but the 5 bases of power are really important. And so there's 5 of these. There's reverent, expert, legitimate, reward, and coercive, alright? And so you shouldn't necessarily be coercive, but we're gonna talk about that in a minute. So, obviously, this is pretty self-explanatory. Reverend is like, do people hold you in high regard? Do they like you? I think mostly people like Ozpin right now, and they like Oscar. Like, from Team Ruby and whatnot. So he gets that, at least. Like, he's somewhat likable. But Yang and Weiss, maybe, because of what they heard from Raven, may be like, But anyways. So that's the first thing. Expert. Is Ozpin qualified to hold this position? We don't know. We only know that the gods assigned him. Nobody's really seen him in a fight before, other than now, right?
If divine right monarchies have taught us anything, it's they work wonderfully when you got a good guy in. However, when you don't have a good guy in, shit goes terribly wrong.
And so that's the other thing. So obviously, he's the professor, so you'd assume that he understands things, but at the same time, in regards to Salem, like, we've seen his combat ability, right? We've seen he's teaching Ruby and Juniper how to fight, that's fine, right? But in regards to Salem, we don't know if he is expert on her, right? He hasn't said anything about her in terms of her weaknesses or where she is, what they're trying to do. So, like, he may not have expert in that regard, right? Or at least he hasn't proven it yet, right? Legitimate. Is he in a position of power, so to speak, right? Is he this is kind of about, like, being an assigned leader. Do you have the formal right to make that demands? And that's, like, what Hunter was saying. Like, if you're a police officer, if you're an elected official, do you have the right, so to speak, to do so? So, Ozpin, I mean, like, I don't know if there's, like, a formal, like, we know there's a formal council, right? But, like, we don't know if they know about this. Like, he's basically, I don't think there is a legitimate position of power here to even go off of, you know what I mean? He was the king before, right? And headmaster, but, like, to take down Salem, though, that's a whole other job.
But headmaster seems to be, like, you are part of this, I guess, it appears, the only governing system in Remnant, and therefore would probably be responsible for
So you could say that, he has the legitimate power, he has the legitimate means, you could say, required, He can be like, oh, I was the king, I was the headmaster, I am the wizard, I know what I'm doing, right? He could say that, that's fine, that's a point in his favor. He has some legitimacy, but at the same time, there's not like a Salem Defense Council where it's like, alright, boys, like, here's the head, The other one's reward. So are you, obviously, are you giving people something for helping out? So this doesn't need to be actually giving people something, but some sort of token of appreciation. Encouragement, like,
I'd fuck a bitch up for a sticker,
boosting their self-worth, so to speak, right? Obviously, monetary rewards are probably appreciated, but are you making people feel like they are valuable to the team? If you're making, kids just die left and right, that may end up being a problem for Ozpin, but let's say from my personal... Yeah, exactly. From my personal perspective, if I saw Pyrrha just die, and John had this problem that he conveniently seemed to forget with Ozpin, like, seeing Pyrrha get sacrificed, I would not feel very appreciated, you know what I mean? I would feel a little, like I was a meat bag. A meat bag, yeah.
Meat shield.
A meat shield, thank you, that's what I was trying to say. And then there's coercion. So this comes from the belief that a person can punish others for non-compliance. So this is what you have to be careful with this one. So this can either, like, scare away your entire team, or make them fear you just enough that they'll know that there's, like, some... consequence here. So Ozpin seems to be instilling the fear into all of them. Like, Ruby, like, thinks that Salem is evil just based off of Cinder's actions and what other people have said, which is fair. Like, what else is she gonna think, right? But, they've instilled that fear into her, but then you look at people like Raven, right? Raven's obviously not so scared that she's still working with Ozpin. She somehow thinks that she's better on her own. And for better or for worse, whether that's true or not, that is what she thinks. And so we can see that maybe Ozpin is failing in this regard, especially, like, Ironwood didn't get punished for disobeying him, so that immediately tells everyone that Ozpin is sort of full of empty threat. You know what I mean? And if anything, Ironwood told Ozpin who was boss, because Ironwood called the council and told on him. Don't you remember that in Volume 3? That the council called Ozpin on the phone and was like, Ozpin, like, we've heard about your behavior at the school, and Ironwood was just like, it's for the best, Oz. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he basically tattletaled and there were no repercussions. So, Ozpin isn't good at making people afraid of him. His only skill is making people afraid of Salem, which is important. And not to say that they should be afraid of Ozpin, but there has to be, you know, some retribution if you're gonna go, like, tell on him and go talk to the council, like, all of that stuff, you know what I mean? Like, to be a good leader, you gotta have a little bit of fear, like, just a little, like, not too much, but, you know, you can't let your people do whatever they want, or else they're gonna do whatever they want. It's like raising kids, you know? Like, you gotta make sure they don't stick forks in electric sockets somehow, you know what I mean?
I almost did that, but with a paper clip and not a fork.
So, that's something. And one more thing. So, legitimate power, though good, can be unstable, because if you lose your title or position, your power can instantly vanish. So imagine if Ozpin wasn't the headmaster of Beacon anymore. For a hot minute, he would lose the only legitimate power he has to be doing shit about shit and his seats on the council. That may be a little bit of an issue, for him, right? To be a true leader, you need a robust source of power that is more than a title, an ability to reward or punish, and access to information. You need expert power, which will get people to listen to you and trust you, and also respect what you say. That isn't just knowledge, but it's also skills. When you prove that you have these skills, people will say that you have expert power. And then obviously there's Remnant. You gotta make sure that people like you. And I asked Rob, I was like, Rob, what about manipulation? Because I'm a psychopath. Rob was the teacher in this class. He's Dr. Rob Elkington, and I think I did a video about leadership dynamics before, but it was about something else unrelated, so you guys may not remember. But he said that eventually the leader will be found out as a manipulator, and because other people will have watched them manipulate someone else. So this is where Raven comes in. That Raven is, you know, bringing her receipts and calling Ozpin out on everything because she watched Ozpin probably manipulate someone. And so that is kind of where I want to end this video. So is Ozpin a good leader? Not by this standard. At least not right now. Does that mean he will never be one? No, because obviously I think Oscar may be able to fill in some of the gaps with which Ozpin is missing.
He's just having an off lifetime.
He's having an off lifetime.
We've all had bad reincarnations, you know.
Exactly.
I'm currently in the middle of one.
So, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I will be doing a video about Salem and maybe even about Ironwood, just so we can kind of go with. And so I'm gonna basically be doing a couple videos explaining these leadership positions and whatnot. So if you guys enjoyed, remember to, like this video. No, likes don't matter. Comment on this video, join our Discord server, and become patrons over on Patreon. I forgot what kind of YouTuber I was there for a minute. And we will see you later. Bye, guys!